The Culture Pop Podcast is brought to you by the law offices of Jacob and Ronnie.
Accident or injury, call Jacob and Ronnie. Call Jacob.
Hey, it's Mase. If you or a friend or loved one is injured in an accident, the first person you should call is my friend Jacob. When I did this, Jacob was great. He helped me by talking through the next steps, which really put my mind at ease. When you're injured in an accident, you got to have an expert. That's why you call Jacob, just like I did. Call Jacob, 844-24-JACOB. That's 844-24-JACOB, or visit calljacob.com.
Call Jacob.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Culture Pop Podcast. I'm Steve Mason, along with 𝐊𝐞𝐥𝐥𝐲 𝐀𝐮𝐂𝐰. This is the show where we talk about everything happening in the world of pop culture. Sue Ballou, do I look tan? I just got back from Hawaii.
You do look tan.
Thank you.
And it makes your hair look whiter.
Thank you. By the way, and you got a haircut. It looks great.
Thank you very much for noticing.
Yes, it's the least I could do. So I wanted to mention a couple of things. First of all, I've got a really cool show today. Kelly AuCoin will join us. You know him from Billions and The Americans, and his latest project is the miniseries Clipped, now streaming on Hulu from our friend Ramona Shelburne. I wanted to mention a couple of things. First of all, 2 Broadway shows in development, Sue. I think both of these are interesting. I wanted to get your take on them. One is a Broadway musical based on the story of TAMMY FAYE. TAMMY FAYE, the musical, has been announced. Christian Borle is going to play, he's a 2-time Tony winner, is going to play Jim Baker in the TAMMY FAYE Baker musical. They've not yet, it's someone named Katie Braben who's going to play TAMMY FAYE. She already won the Olivier Award at the West End for her performance. What do you think? Are you in on a TAMMY FAYE musical?
Absolutely. The film was incredible.
It was great.
Who's the actor? I'm like blanking on the actress who won the Oscar. She was insane.
It was, the one.
Oh, come on. No, we got to.
Jessica Chastain.
Jessica Chastain was insanely good.
She was amazing. Okay,
are you in on it?
Oh, absolutely. Sign me up. I'm totally in.
Totally.
And apparently it took the West End by storm. So it's not like it's going to make its world debut on Broadway. So it's already pretty good if it's made the cross. The other one is Studio 54, the musical. It's in development now. Producers Robert Greenblatt and Neil Marin. No casting yet, but Studio 54, the musical, is about 2 scrappy impresarios turning an abandoned West Side. Well, you know the story of Studio 54. So Steve Rebell and
anybody
Ian
doing
Schrager.
coke and having sex? Is that?
I'm guessing there may be an Andy Warhol sighting. Maybe Liza Minnelli, Truman Capote, Bianca Jagger, some of those people that used to hang out there. I'm all in on Studio 54, the musical. And, Studio 54, and I don't know if it's going to be at the old Studio 54, the theater, but I saw a show at the old Studio 54. I saw Cabaret with Alan Cumming as the lead, and it was fantastic. And there was something about seeing it at Studio 54. I'd go a little deeper here. So, obviously, Cabaret, they are awaiting almost certain death, right? And they're dancing and singing as fast as they can to avoid. In Studio 54, it was almost the same thing. It was the late 70s. It was Studio 54. Everybody's having a really good time. And then AIDS hits, and it changes everything. So I think it was interesting seeing a show at Studio 54 itself, especially one like this that thematically I thought was a match.
Yeah, and I kind of, when you said that there was going to be a musical about this subject, I just automatically went to Rent. I kind of think it's going to have a Rent type of feel to it, because there was all those like scaffolds, and there was dancing, and just aesthetically what the set is going to look like.
So Rent is the musical that I've seen more than any other musical. I've seen it at least 20 times. Does that make me weird?
No, not at all.
It was, how you have certain foods that are like comfort food, like macaroni and cheese is comfort food. Rent was Broadway comfort food for me.
Yeah.
I used to go when I was having a bad week. As you know, I did have at least one bad week when we lived in New York. At least one that I can think of.
Oh God, it were probably 30 something.
Yeah, they probably were. So we both went to see the brand new movie, The Bikeriders, starring Tom Hardy, Austin Butler, Jodie Comer, written and directed by Jeff Nichols, who had previously done Mud back in 2012. Michael Shannon plays a great role in it. What was your take? Because let's be honest, when we talked about this originally, you said I had heard Bikeriders was good, and you heard Bikeriders was not good, right?
Yeah, just by one person. But
that's a very small sample size.
Oh yeah. I'm just saying that was my only reference, is that someone I know didn't like it. I wanted to like it more.
Mm-hmm.
I first of all, just to give kudos, I thought that the direction was great, the aesthetically, artistically, it was great. The casting was amazing. The performances were so good. But story-wise, and I know that it's inspired by a book from the photojournalist.
Yep.
Was it Danny Lyon?
Played by Mike Feist.
Yeah, I just felt it was a little flat. The story. I just wasn't drawn in that much. I was drawn in more to the performances than I was to the actual film.
Right. So I loved Tom Hardy and I loved Austin Butler in this movie. They were both great. And they were the equivalent of Brando and Dean in this movie, were they not? They both sort of hit that mark, especially Tom Hardy. And Jodie Comer is like the whole ballgame. I mean, she is so good. The accent I've heard criticism of, I actually buy that as somebody from the Midwest. I buy that as a Midwestern accent. And I thought Michael Shannon was great in his role.
With very little dialogue. Just facially, you know?
He was calling everybody a pinko, and he said, "What's a pinko?" And they said, "Somebody who wears short pants and tennis shoes." It's so damn funny.
Oh God, it was hysterical.
Yeah. The story worked for me. One of the things it reminded me of, and this will sound weird, but it reminded me of being in a fraternity. You know, when I was at Bowling Green, I was in a fraternity, Sigma Phi Epsilon, and all my best friends were in the fraternity. Like, I didn't really have friends that weren't in the fraternity. Everybody was. And I felt like that sort of vibe, that masculine guy energy, the desire to belong to something bigger than yourself. I felt like that was really captured in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, personally, for me, what I took away from it was I wasn't ever part of a sorority. My sister dated a guy who was in a fraternity. It was they were like greasers, you know? And I just remember my father being so upset because he came over to the house and he was wearing this leather jacket and he was Italian, you know, he wasn't Jewish. Any guy that wasn't Jewish, you know, he had an issue with. But I belong to a club in the sense of the friendships, my circle. We were definitely a club, and there were a lot of bad kids in that club. They were good friends of mine, but they were bad. And I was a party to some of the badness, you know, like we always ditched, we checks, you know, dash and dine, you know, dine and dash. I stole from department stores.
Jeez, what is this, a full confession here?
Well, I'm just saying. So I hung out with this, you know, like a bad crowd.
Right.
And you kind of had, in order to, and we were very popular and it was a lot of fun and it was dangerous, but fun. So I stayed with it because what was I going to do? I mean, these were my friends.
Right.
And, you know, one of my girlfriends he was kind of our Tom Hardy, I guess, the leader of our group. And I mean, he beat the shit out of people at parties and stuff.
Really?
And yeah, I mean, it was really, really crazy and violent. But so like I look at the Jodie Comer character who stuck it out as long as she could.
Yeah.
Because she loved the guy. I mean, I had boyfriends that were just, you know, they were bad, but I loved them. They were charmers like he was. So I related to that aspect of it.
You related through her.
Through her.
And I related through them. There's a scene where Tom Hardy and Austin Butler, I think Tom Hardy is talking to Austin Butler about taking over the club, the Vandals, and they are so close. It is such an intimate conversation where you don't see men, but this was a relationship that was really, really, and not sexual, but intimate.
Oh yeah. Like when he moved in and got really close, I was like, where is this going? Is he going to kiss him? I was wondering whether that was going to happen.
Yeah. So on your Sue 𝐊𝐞𝐫𝐯�𝐢𝐀 scale of Rotten Tomatoes, 1 to 100%, what do you give it?
I would give it, I guess, a 70%.
70%. I'm at 81%. So a little bit better than you. I actually really I recommend the movie. I think certainly if you're part of motorcycle culture, you got to see the movie. I would be curious to hear a review from people who are involved in motorcycle culture. But as a story, I was roped in. Jeff Nichols' great adaptation of that book. I really, really enjoyed the Bikeriders. All right, here we go. Let's do this. Our guest today is probably best known for his role as Dollar Bill Stern on the long-running television hit Billions. He's also starred on shows like The Americans, We Crashed, and 𝐊𝐴𝐳. His film work includes Julia and Julia, The Post, and The Holdovers. His latest project is the limited series Clipped, now airing on Hulu. Kelly AuCoin is here. Kelly, thanks a lot for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This is going to be fun.
So we love the show. As I told you off the air, Ramona Shelburne, one of my very best friends, and she obviously, it's all based on her podcast series. So I've been hanging on every episode. You're great as Andy Roeser, a guy that I knew and worked with when he was with the Clippers. I know you're a big NBA fan because I think you follow the Blazers, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I could turn this around and see. Here, I'm going to show you one thing.
Do it.
But
there you go.
It's Blazers all the way. When they won the championship, signed by Bill Walton.
Very, very
man.
cool.
The late
Bill was
great.
a sweetheart of a guy. I loved him.
I got to meet him once. I was doing a play in La Jolla, and he was living in San Diego, and it was a political play, which I guess whenever they put on an interesting political place, he would come. And my wife was in the audience, happened to be there visiting. And I got this text as soon as I came off stage that said, "Get out here now," because she knows how much he meant to me. And my screensaver is a picture of me with him in the lobby.
That?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that is awesome, man.
Anyway, I digress.
So given your NBA following, how much did you remember about the Donald Sterling situation when it went down?
Well, I remember, I remembered a lot of it. I thought it was, I wasn't in the area. I'm sure that everyone I know from Los Angeles was like, it was all over the news constantly. I just got the ESPN updates and maybe Twitter updates. I did have an interesting, there was an interesting wrinkle, not an insight exactly, but my dad had gave Adam Silver one of his first jobs before he went to law school. So they've been friends for a long time. Not that Adam was giving him any information about what was going on in his brain, but at one point my dad did text him after his decision and said, "Proud of you," So that was just an interesting connection for me. As soon as I got the gig, I think I listened to Ramona's podcast all in one sitting, and it was so good. And my takeaway was that it was so much weirder and so much more complicated than I even knew. And I thought it was pretty weird and complicated. But it's fascinating stuff. She's brilliant. Ramona's brilliant.
So how did you come to playing Andy Roeser? Who is he to you? Like as a character study?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. I don't get asked a question like that with characters I play that often. I do think at least in the way we are portraying it. I mean, obviously there are things behind the scenes that are extrapolations, just like any docudrama. And this was meticulously researched, but to me, he's a among other things, he's a cautionary tale about making the deal with the devil. The inertia of working for a man like that for so many years, and perhaps the recognition that, as in episode 4, 𝐊𝐿𝐵𝐿 says to him, the stink of this organization, with the stink of this organization on me, where else am I going to go?
Yes.
And I think that applies to Andy as well. And, or at least, it applies to the character I'm playing. And it's so, when you're inside of it, when you're inside the terrible, awful thing, I think it's pretty easy to put blinders on. It's upsettingly easy to put blinders on. And if things sort of incrementally occur to you, it's not like, if you were to have stepped away for a year and come back, you might have been like, oh my God, I can't associate with this. But maybe the incremental buying in, and then he became culpable as well.
So, I mean, obviously, Donald Sterling, horrible human being, as is revealed in the show, and as we all know. Do you make that decision? You were talking a little bit about the character. Is in your head, Andy, is he a bad guy? Because obviously he allows or facilitates a lot of what Donald did. He creates a bubble for Donald, so he doesn't realize what he's like in the real world. Do you view him as a bad guy, or how do you view him as an actor?
I think you can play a character viewing the person as bad. You have to delve into the motivations and try to again extrapolate what would make someone go along to get along. I think all of us are capable of doing bad things. I think even more so, all of us are capable of allowing bad things to happen. And by ignoring something that you might be able to actually have an influence on, or perhaps sticking it out in a situation where you do recognize something is very wrong, you can't do anything about it. I think it's more that. I think I don't know that he is a bad person, but he behaved very badly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, didn't he have?
And I think what was the most of what I based the character on was the script, because it was so specific and wonderfully written by Gina and Rembert, and the information that was largely provided by Ramona. So the specificity of that helped me, I think everybody, but it helped me dive into some of these scenes. It became clear from the script that there were moments that I'll just say because it's my version of the character. There were moments when I'm aware, this is bad, but the way I get through it is by smiling, and okay, there's a little bit of Ned Flanders in the characterization, a little bit of Smithers and a little bit of Ned Flanders. I went to the Simpsons school of acting. But I think that struck me as a very honest way to attack it, because if we can really just, but let's, that's a way I think a lot of us get through difficult situations where we really don't maybe have the spine or the energy or really know exactly what we can do, but we don't extract ourselves. Diving in with a okay, that wasn't the most intellectual answer. I make a lot of noises when I talk about acting, but yeah.
So, didn't Rosner have a long relationship with Sterling? Did Sterling give him his start? So was that somewhat of the motivation for him? His allegiance to him, although he had to be torn because he knew what was going on. He really gave him his start, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, if not exactly his start, certainly very, very early on. I'm going to say close to just right out of school. And when you grow, with someone, when someone gives you a shot, you do have a tendency to forgive them or look the other way, or make excuses in your own brain for their behavior. And I think there was an element of, oh, that's really bad, but oh my God, that was so audacious. Like, all the stuff he gets away with, in a certain warped perception, can become to a person impressive, especially if there's perhaps a father figure type of relationship, father-ish, son-ish type of relationship. And, what he learned about business was from this guy, nagging questions of morality aside.
So, we worked around, because I work for ESPN, we worked around Donald Sterling a lot. And in fact, I remember being on a playoff trip, being with Donald Sterling at a dinner. And he did not know my name, despite the fact that I introduced myself 3 times. It's Donald's world. Every time you met him, he introduced himself. But we knew he was a racist. When I talk about local sports media, we knew he was a really bad guy. And we didn't really do anything about it because we didn't have any evidence until those V. Stiviano tapes came out. But I think that Ed O'Neill captured the weirdness of Donald Sterling. Like, Donald Sterling, intensely weird man. And I thought Ed O'Neill did it right.
I never met the guy, but that's one of the things I picked up on, as I was saying, from the podcast, from Ramona's podcast. It was was the weirdness of it, and the weirdness of him, and the weirdness of Shelley and their relationship, and whatever Ed was doing was just every day on set. I'd see him. He captured something really specific, really weird, and really plausible to me, not having met the guy. So I'm glad to hear you say that. I also think, just in terms of his performance, I think everybody knows, everyone who's watched any TV knows that Ed O'Neill is a fantastic actor. But if, it's just going to sound so strange, but if you could say about someone like Ed that he's underrated, even though people think he's freaking fantastic, I think this show might show people that he was, or he has been. The character work that he's doing is so specific and so completely invested and so different from the characters I've seen him play before. I love it. I watch, there's scenes, he's got this tick he added that I didn't notice when we were filming, but there's a tick, there's something he does with his mouth at the end of certain sentences. And I don't know if that's just something that he did organically or if that's something that he picked up on Sterling. I don't know, but it's so specific and it tells such a story. There's an arrogant, there's a disdainful kind of quality to it. It's whether we can't quite put your finger on it, but the amalgam of those types of things. And it's just like, he punctuates so many of his awful statements with stuff like that, and flippant statements. Like one's in the trailer where Shelley says, "Are we bad people?" And he's like, "Does it matter?" And then there's this like, I can't do it, but there's this thing. It's like a little exclamation point, and it's just like, acting class, great stuff.
Yeah, to me, seeing him play a role like this really took me back, because I would never expect Ed O'Neill to play a part like this, because he never has. He's always been fun and a nice guy, like you said. What was
even Al Bundy was ultimately a lovable, awful person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, what was he like? After doing takes, what kind of actor is he? Does he kind of stay in his character, or does he break and kind of have fun, like at craft services?
Yeah, no, he's not a Daniel Day-Lewis method type. There were no one on that set was, but he's very dropped in the moment and can be scary, which is awesome. But yeah, there were so many times when he was throwing something at me, whether it was something physical or something verbal, and I would flutter away or whatever. After the take, we'd turn back around and our eyes would meet, and he would just be like, we would just giggle, even when we were behaving terribly, because there's something surprised that Gina Welch, the showrunner, and the directors were able to create something funny out of this. And a lot of it comes, I think, just from the awkwardness of the weirdness and people's reactions. Those scenes in the dressing room, like when Ed is saying to Sheldon, who plays DeAndre Jordan, it's like, what's your wingspan? And he's just like, and he's looking like, someone help, like the reaction. It's horrible, and it makes my skin crawl. But these actors are pulling out these incredibly funny moments, not by trying to be funny, but just reacting to the absurdity and the weirdness. So that's one thing I really, I'm really proud of the show, that it really hits a lot of different notes while never shying away from how weird and awful this guy and the incident was.
His deposition, I forget, was that episode 3, I think, was his deposition.
Okay.
And he is so outrageous in that deposition. At one point, he said, "Why wouldn't I call a prostitute delicious?" And I'm like, it is so friggin' weird. And the amazing thing about that is every word was written. That was performed exactly as the deposition went down, word for word, which is crazy to me.
Yeah. That's nuts. I wasn't there for that scene. I watched it, obviously, but I remember reading it on the page, and I was like, "What?" But I think I remember actually Ramona had she played some of the tapes, or maybe read. I can't remember if that was on tape or whatever. But she brought those those lines up. And the final episode is going to have the Anderson Cooper interview, so that's
wow,
you're in for a treat. I hope I don't think I spoiled anything. I think there are pictures, but anyway, it's another great one.
Nice.
Yeah. Wow. We were talking about the show on another one of our shows, and I was saying how I've hated certain characters deeply, like watching them from my couch. And I don't think I ever wanted to just like reach into the television and strangle he and V so badly. And at sometimes even Shelley, just because she just stayed. And I know at some point she did leave, but they're still together.
Oh, they're still together. And let's not forget that she was just as much a part of his real estate empire as he was. She's no victim, as far as it, in my opinion. The show also does a good job, I think, of humanizing, not to say pulling away and glossing over or anything bad, but show it. No one's a mustache twirler. No one's a cartoon. Even Donald, every once in a while, you see that some frailty or some weakness or some love with one of them. Often weird love, but. So yeah, I'm glad. Did you ever want to reach in and strangle me? I'm curious. I watch it and I want to strangle me.
Not as deeply, because you definitely weren't as vile as they were. I mean, I in some ways I sympathize with your situation, and even the fact that you had to play the two of them. I mean, you're dealing with Shelley, and then you're dealing with him, and you're dealing with the play. I mean, it was No, I'm curious. Like, how did the players feel about you?
I don't know, actually. My few scenes, at least in terms of the regarding the actors playing the players, my few scenes with them, all they really saw was me standing behind Donald while he was invading their dressing room and going, "Isn't this great? Isn't this great?" And so the vibe I got from them was not a friendly one.
Right.
But I couldn't tell you what the real life relationship was like.
So I want to ask you about a couple other things, and then we'll circle back around to Clipped, if that's okay.
Sure.
So your dad was a 9-term U.S. congressman from Oregon, and I'm wondering how that shapes your life, like the stress of an election every 2 years. Or I know he had a big Senate race that was it stressful for the whole family? How did that shape your life and your career?
Yeah, it's like show and tell. There's a picture of
nice.
My parents' first re-election. That's me.
That's very cool.
What year was that?
That would have been, let's see, I believe that's the first re-election, so that would have been 76.
Okay. He
was in state legislature from 70 to 74. 74, he won the U.S. House and was in for 18 years. Yeah, there was stress. There was a brief, but beautiful. He was the first Democrat ever elected to the first district of Oregon. There was a brief period after 3 or 4 elections where, not that we ran unopposed, but we weren't presented with particularly strong candidates. And so he still worked hard. The campaign was still rigorous, but there wasn't a lot of stress. It wasn't really in doubt. And then there were a couple times during the Reagan Revolution where they did run a very strong candidate. And I think we won by 54 and then 53% in back-to-back elections. And then they gave up again, sort of. And he essentially retired from Congress when he ran for Senate. I'm getting too much into the weeds. So there were definitely stressful times, but we all loved it too. I mean, maybe we loved it more than Dad did because he was the one actually on the line. But I love the fact that it took us to DC. I love the fact that I feel comfortable in a small town in Oregon where we lived. I feel comfortable in the mountains of Oregon where my family's all from, and a lot of my family still lives. And I feel comfortable on the East Coast in a bigger city. And I live in New York now. That was a great thing that my parents gave to us. I'm naturally an extrovert too, so it was kind of easy for me to pick up whenever we moved. In terms of performance, I don't think it'll come as a surprise to anyone to think of the fact that that politics has a performative quality to it.
Oh, really? I did not realize that.
I know,
especially
blowing your mind right now.
At this point in history, I can't even believe performance means something. Yeah,
performance, But even when it's not in a bad way, there's if you get up, you have to know what your audience is. Either you're at a town hall meeting, or you're talking to someone one-on-one, or you're giving a big speech, or maybe a debate where you have to know how to get your ideas across. And just sort of babbling on without a plan, without a speech, you're not going to necessarily get the ideas across that you want to. So you have to perform it. You have to write it, create it, perform it. So seeing my dad up in front of people while not actually acting was a little bit of a light bulb. Us as a family, and you saw the picture, that's waving and peace signs as we won, and we're up there with them. We got used to being in front of people as well. And again, not acting, but just like the camera doesn't bother me, or being on stage doesn't bother me. And my mom was a singer, and my grandpa was a mandolin player. So there was some art in there, and we performance art in there. And when that bug really struck me, I was comfortable because I think of being in front of folks.
Well, is it true that you made your acting debut in one of your dad's campaign commercials?
My screen acting debut, yes. Big spending Democrat has always been the epithet that they want to throw at Democrats, and we were getting that. And I was his son, long-suffering son, washing the car, talking about how cheap my dad was. And the tagline was, for something about bringing his own popcorn to Blazer games. That's really kind of embarrassing. And I think the tagline was, "Don't get me wrong, I love the guy. It's just, well, have you ever tried to discount chewing gum?" And then I make a face, and that's it.
Did you have anything? Did you have anything to do with the script?
I didn't. I didn't just to memorize, but it was really fun. It was really fun. I look back on it now, and I was like, that was a really cool thing for him to do.
How old were you?
I think I had finished my freshman year of college. So it was the summer between first fresh and sophomore year.
So I want to ask you about The Americans, which I think is one of the most underrated series of all time. Absolutely love the show.
I'm right there with you. Yeah, I love it.
You played Pastor Tim. Here was my take on the show. I was in high school in the 80s. I had no idea that Soviet spies could have been lurking on my cul-de-sac on Brayer Lane in Maumee, Ohio. I totally forgot how paranoid everybody was about the Soviet Union in the 1980s. And The Americans really captures that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I did too. And I lived in Washington, D.C. The same time they did. And we figured out I was almost exactly Paige's age. I remember when The Day After aired. I remember the warnings that families should watch it together. And we actually did watch it together. I know it so well that I am completely aware of how little they shot in D.C. It was all shot actually in Brooklyn and New York. I think they did some exteriors down there. But I thought they did a great job of creating the vibe of DC at that time. And I agree with you. It was my favorite show on TV when I auditioned late in season 2. And I wanted it so badly. I knew I was going to, almost swore. I knew I was going to mess it up. And thank God I didn't, because I loved being a part of that.
So he was a creepy good guy, would you say?
It's funny. I was always amused because I was for 2 seasons I was simultaneously doing Dollar Bill on Billions and Pastor Tim on The Americans. And Pastor Tim could not be, at least what you actually see, could not be a warmer, lovelier, more socially justice oriented person, and everybody hated him. Like literally. Reddit wanted him dead. All of Reddit there was a whole thread about how punchable my face was and whether it was my face or my hair. And then Dollar Bill, who's literally a criminal, but is kind of cool, I guess. Everyone loved him. I was like, wait a minute, what's going on? I think it was for Dollar Bill. For Pastor Tim, I think it was, everyone loved the main characters, the Jennings, so much. And the show did a great job of sucking you in, and then every third episode or so, they would do something just horrible to an innocent person, and then you feel culpable. But that was great. But they loved them so much that just this guy with the stupid hair was going to get in their way and maybe bring them down. It was like that people hated him. And they loved by the end when he doesn't turn them in. I remember people were like, I really didn't think he had it in him. I really thought he was a weasel.
You mentioned Dollar Bill on Billions, which is such a great role, and you're this funny, cocky stock analyst guy, and all you guys, Damian Lewis and Paul Giamatti, you look like you're having so much fun on that show. I'm wondering, the show obviously wrapped up its run. How difficult is it to let go of a role like Dollar Bill?
We did have a great time. We had a blast. I don't know if you've seen this picture. This is actually, that's me, and that's Damien, and that's David Constable's Wags. This was like an early morning. We're just all passed out. That's funny. I said we all had so much fun, and then they showed all of us passed out.
Well, that can lead to
that could be fun.
out.
That could come from fun.
That's true. Yeah. All the acts of that partying. It's hard to let a show like that go because of the relationships that you build over 7 seasons and 8 years, because we were all keeping in touch during the year. We were off for almost literally a year during the shutdowns. So you really get to know people. It becomes a family. And I've often said that the level of toxicity that these characters showed towards each other or towards their jobs, and the level of misbehavior is in an almost inverse proportion to the quality of the humans playing these characters. Just a great group. So it became tight. That was the hardest thing to let go. And I miss Dollar Bill. I miss saying the lines and everything. But it's also nice to do new stuff now. 7 seasons is a long time. I got to do something like Clipped because of that. Because I wasn't locked into that anymore. But yeah, I'll miss that camaraderie and that's sad. And those people.
So you were saying that you miss saying their lines, and the writing on this show. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And, Succession, holds maybe a close second to a certain. I mean, Succession was great for what it did for that show, but for this show, the obscurity was like out of this world. I mean, there were times where I had to pause and look something up. And I think I'm, pretty well read and versed in a lot of, pop culture and sports and stuff. But I think it was Brian Koppelman, I'm almost positive, one of the creators and showrunners, he said that the characters are incredibly well read on this show. So that is why they speak the way they do. And I wanted to know, what would have been Dollar Bill's favorite book?
Oh, geez. Put me on the spot.
I know, I'm sorry.
I mean, I think he would have been an Ayn Randian, maybe Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged.
Sure.
But I also think he wouldn't have too much time for fiction. So I think he'd get the Cliff Notes because he'd want to know the arguments and he'd agree with the arguments. But he's like, yeah, I don't care about the love story. I already got the 2 wives and the girlfriend. I don't need more. And maybe, yeah, I think that. Let's go with that. I think those would be his favorite books. Speaking of obscure references, I'd owe a familiarity with the 𝐊𝐿𝐴𝐭𝐞𝐫𝐯𝐢𝐀 Rapids because of the show. I got a script and I was just like, Bill's at a conference room, a conference meeting, and says, I need this to flow like the 𝐊𝐴𝐭𝐿𝐴𝐭𝐲 Rapids. And I'm like, okay, sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
And I'm glad it's okay. Yeah, I can't explain to you how strong I've been in only swearing that one time. I'm a big swear. That's probably the only thing I share with Dollar Bill is our propensity for swearing. Yeah, it's always fun. And late, maybe by season 5, there's a great self-referential line that they wrote where Ben Kim says to Tuck is a little lost with some of the, there's been a scene of different references bouncing back and forth. And he's like, wait, what? And Ben Kim looks at him and he's like, look, if you want to work here, you gotta hone up on your references or something like that. You gotta learn this stuff. It was just a nice little meta kind of moment.
So last thing for you, I want you to put yourself in your actor's head and tell me this. Do you think at the top of one of those buildings in the Wilshire district where Jackie and Donald live, do you think they're watching Clipped?
Oh, fascinating. I'm going to say, yeah, I think they are. I think the people involved will at least have it's hard not to watch yourself or to watch someone's version of you.
Yeah, I went through this with the Lakers in winning time. I know all the principal players, and they were so. Jerry West obviously was very upset about that. The late great Jerry West. So it's tough to see yourself portrayed on screen because you're getting that sort of heightened sense of drama that goes along with your life. My theory is that I don't think they're watching. I think Donald Sterling is like, it's my world. I don't need that sort of noise in my life. I think in his head, he doesn't think he did anything wrong.
Oh, I'm sure of that. And that's an interesting take. It could be. Yeah, it absolutely could be. Speaking of Jerry West, by the way, the late, great Jerry West, as you say, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I actually found him so endearing. That characterization of him, it made me like him even more. And I'm not criticizing his criticism, but for whatever it was worth, if I ever had a chance to talk to him, I'd say, I loved you. That was one of your character was one of my favorites in the show. But anyway, that's about winning time.
I was going to say, go ahead, Sue.
No, go ahead. Finish that because I want to go back to something real quick.
Okay. I wanted to mention this about Jerry West because I thought they did capture, and I don't know if he threw trophies or later on. I mean, all that stuff. But he was so obsessed with winning. So obsessed. Yeah. He was one of those guys that couldn't stand to lose. And I remember I was doing a celebrity golf tournament at Riviera, and we had heard in advance that Jerry had a hole-in-one on 13. And we were like, oh, this is unbelievable. And now we get to talk to Jerry West. So Jerry West rolls up, and we're going to talk to Jerry about his hole. I said, congratulations on the hole-in-one, Jerry. And he said, I missed that fucking putt at 17. And he's like, this is a guy that couldn't even enjoy the hole-in-one. He was focused on something that didn't go right. To me, that story is
that's great.
Captures Jerry West.
Yeah.
That's great.
That kind of reminds me of stand-up comedians, you know, because I did stand-up for a long time, and you can have the greatest set in the world and focus on that one person sitting in the front who never laughed and think, I had a shitty set.
I had it. Yeah. I mean, I've never done stand-up before. God bless you. To me, that's one of the, I can only imagine that's one of the hardest things in the world to do. But yeah, if you're on stage, and I love theater, I give a good performance, but there was a moment I missed and I didn't get that laugh. I remember there was a play I did. My opening line got a huge laugh every night. Closing night, I decided to do something a little different with it. Nothing. And I never had a chance to go back and do it again. One last thing. I know if shut me up if we're going over.
No, this is good.
So I think I had known somewhat, but not very clearly, that 𝐊𝐿𝐥𝐿 had a lot to do with the beginning of Showtime.
Sure.
And I was young enough to have sort of forgotten about it. But what I love about that is that means that this thwarted Portland Trailblazer empire, or semi-dynasty maybe, because that was a young team and they were great. Some of that Jack Ramsey magic went down and actually was one of the seeds of Showtime, and that just gives me some time, because as a Blazer fan, you'll understand that as a Blazer fan, I'm long suffering.
Yes.
So
it's been a while. It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a minute. But then it just kills me, because I think of, it was only a couple years later that Bird and Magic came into the league, and it could have been, instead of the Sixers, the Lakers, and the Celtics, it could have been those three and the Blazers. And it's a likely thing that those four would have been the dominant teams for at least 5 years if they'd stayed healthy. Anyway, I digress.
Well, it's not like they passed on Jordan.
No, it's not like they passed on Jordan. I don't know what you're talking about. Or Kevin Durant. What?
Hey, listen, Kelly, this has been awesome. The show is great. You're great in it. It's clipped. It's streaming on Hulu. Fascinating chapter in NBA history. Appreciate you giving us some time, man.
This is really a blast. Thanks for having me on, guys.
There you have it. The Culture Pop Podcast. Kelly AuCoin, great there, and great in he's like one of the most dependable supporting actors there is. You can put him in anything, and he elevates the material, I think.
Yeah, he's a very cool guy. I had a feeling. I mean, I watched a little bit of interview with him. He was on Rich Eisen's show, and he's just, to be hacky and say that he's money because he worked on Billions. He totally is money.
Yeah. I wondered. I didn't get a chance to ask. I wondered, if you're doing Billions, do you automatically go to your E-Trade account and start trading stocks and stuff?
Well, I didn't get to ask him how much he had to learn to even do the dialogue, because when we've interviewed actors who play doctors, they're, it has to be fluid, that they're, they're talking in medical terms. So I wanted to know how much he had to learn to do the part and how much he learned about the stock world from doing the part.
We'll do that the next time we get him on.
Okay.
Just a matter of time. He's always in great stuff. Hey, look, if you're listening right now on Apple or Spotify, please take a minute, subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star review, and you can write a little something there, 5-star rating. And then on YouTube, hit the like button and then leave any comment you want underneath. Subscribe to the Culture Pop Podcast channel on YouTube. There you have it. There is the Culture Pop Podcast for today. Thanks a lot for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.